So what does us separate from the pack? I think everybody, and especially you and Sense, made it very clear. I love technology, I love sensors, I love data analytics, all of that, but it's obviously not about technology at the end of the day. It is about what does the building do for people who live in the building, who work in the building, who have to get to the building, and how do we make them more happy? How do we make a building that attracts people because of the war of talent? So big customers are now looking into attracting people, and the building is becoming part of the story of what they want to be. The building has to be nice to work in. Not a lot of people go through the office from 9 o'clock till 5, but they are there only on an occasionally situation to talk to either colleagues or meet customers. Maybe they spend an hour on a desk to work on a report, and then they go to a meeting room, have a serious meeting, a video conference, then they want to go to the gym, have a nice coffee, relax. We even have now massage and shoe polishers at the office. It's getting crazier and crazier. If I tell my daddy about that, he says, "Are you working?" I said, "Well, really not," but having a lot of fun. So what is really changing us is that we, I think, as a company, as EDGE Technologies, start to figure out, at the end of the day, even though we are a developer, and of course we sell our buildings to investors, at the end of the day, we build buildings for people. That's the number one issue. So we even hired scientists now, behavioral experts, health experts, psychologists, all kind of people who really can look into what really would make an amazing building. Obviously, you want to have these cognitive services. So our building, EDGE Olympic, actually does allow you to talk to the room now. Initially, maybe a little bit of a gadget, but at the end, not a gadget. And that's the kind of stuff we are doing. And as a developer, we still develop buildings like anyone else. We find a plot, we find an architect, need a couple of engineers, need a general contractor, and then we build a building. What really sets us apart is that then, when the building is finished and being sold off to an investor, we take a 20-year main lease on the building. That's a pretty unique position. And this is why we demonstrate, or how we demonstrate, we are serious about what we build. By taking a main lease on the whole building and then rent it out to other customers, as you can imagine, that brings the burden of the risks to us. And then it also changed the whole way you think about designing a building. So I think there's a lot of bad quality buildings in the world. That's not a secret. Why? Because this industry has been very fragmented. So the real estate developer buys a plot, finds an architect, and then really wants to get the building done as quick as possible, as cheap as possible. Unfortunately, that's not the only ones who are driving cost on day one to the lowest possible bracket, but the installers do exactly the same, the engineering companies do the same, and the general contractors do the same. So at the end of the day, you have bad quality buildings. So we take a very holistic view from the beginning to the end and take responsibility for the building. And now, whatever you do in the building, you start to think about not the cheapest on day one, but what does it cost to maintain it? And how does it work for the actual people in that building? We started off as a company with a huge track record in sustainability. Before I actually joined the company, I only worked there for 2.5 years. Then we realized the EDGE in Amsterdam, which became a kind of famous, to our big surprise. And then, obviously, OVG, now EDGE Technologies, start to realize, hey, technology is also playing a very important part in making amazing buildings. And now, of course, design, as mentioned before, and the health and all the experience in the building. So it's all of those. We do not believe that it's one of them, it's all of those. So you have to have a very holistic view on the whole design, the quality, the total cost of ownership, but also on smart from an energy perspective, intelligent for people to get into the building and how to use the building, but also healthy, high quality air. All of those things come into play. And obviously, sensors are important because with the sensors, we can see what's going on in the building. And with the sensors and with the data, we can analyze and then we can start optimizing the energy consumption of the building. We can use the data to optimize the occupancy of the building, not just meeting rooms. So we rent out space to customers, and every month, or actually every day, if they want, every second, because it's live data, but for whatever reason in our mind, people still ask about monthly and quarterly reports, and they say, well, it's live, so you can have a report any moment you want. But you go back to your customer and say, hey, this is the amount of space you rented, this is the amount of meeting rooms you have, and actually you're not using it in a the most optimized way. So maybe you need a little bit less room, or maybe you should hire a little bit more. So this is the other thing we're doing. We changed the whole leasing perspective. We now offer 3, 5, and 7. The market still asks for 10, 12-year contracts. That's a bit strange. I'm sure if you fly over from wherever you came into Amsterdam, you didn't buy an aircraft, you probably bought a ticket. If you go to a hotel, you buy a night to sleep in a hotel, and depending on whether you pay a 3 or 5 star, that's what you do. You don't buy a hotel typically. Some people might, but most people don't. So, and we believe that that's where this is going. Office space as a service. And this is also why we now do the fit out. So it's no longer just delivering a building and then a tenant comes in and then they put in a lot of their own technology. But what we actually do is we do all the things which are typically not part of the building. For sure, the key components like energy, like light, like elevators, like climate systems, but building access systems are typically not part of a building. We put them in. Camera systems for CCTV and sensing emotion and counting people, yes, that's exactly what we do, because we think we need that kind of knowledge. So audio visuals, fit out, furniture. So we combine a lot of those things to actually give a complete solution to customers, and we see that customers are asking for more flexibility in lease terms, but also more flexibility in space. This is why we typically drive towards multi-tenant buildings. Because if you have like 4 or 5 customers in a building, obviously it becomes a little bit easier. Some of them will grow, some of them will go bankrupt, I don't know. Some of them will get a little bit smaller. Average life cycle of companies is now down to 12 years. We still think of companies like, oh, they exist for 75 or 100 years. That's not the reality of the world. It's all very short time. So that's basically, the holistic view. And now about technology, because this is about technology today. It's called PlaceTech for a reason. What we are doing different is that we do not just buy technology from the big vendors, like whether they ThyssenKrupp or Schneider or the Honeywells or whoever they are. That's not what we do, because we don't like what they have in their catalog. If you ask for sensors, they're more than happy to sell you 5 or 6 different sensors. And then some guy comes in and pops 5 holes in the ceiling, puts 5 cables behind and hooks it up to the building management system. Not a very smart way to do it. Almost all the sensors you can buy from startups today are now battery powered. And then they tell you, oh, they last for 6, 7 years. Yeah, if you have one sensor doing temperature every 15 minutes, that's true. If you have a couple of sensors and you want to do it quicker and faster because you want to have more interaction with what's going on in the building, it doesn't run for 6, 7 years. If you then estimate one sensor for, let's say, every 10 square meters in the building, you can easily see you end up with 5, 6, 7, 8,000 sensors in the typical buildings we build. You don't want to be the guy or the person who has to replace the batteries on a regular basis. So what we did, work with partners in the industry. So it's not our objective to make this technology ourselves. It is about driving the industry to do it differently. So we made one sensor node, as we call it, with 10 different sensors in there, with localization based on Bluetooth, which is powered by the light source from Philips. Obviously, you have to change the light source a little bit. It's LED, nothing fancy about that, but it needs a little bit of output voltage to drive the sensor module. If you look at digital ceiling technology, we call it digital ceiling. Cisco tried to steal that from us, but it was not trademarked, so we still call it digital ceiling. Ceilings, what I learned when we were doing the EDGE, I was totally in shock. In the last 3 months, when we were in the building, the number of people who come into that building every morning, get onto ladders, start drilling in the concrete, and then put in cables, in ducts, and I don't know what. It was beyond imagination. Everything I learned from my IT background, I thought, what the hell are these people doing? This must be extremely inefficient. So the first thing when I joined OVG, now EDGE Technologies, is this is something we should do differently. So we now have created, again with 5 partners, a ceiling technology, which we call a cassette, which is 4 meters 20 long, 120 wide, and only 8 centimeters thick. That's basically roughly your iPhone on the side. And that includes heating, cooling, acoustics, sprinklers, sensors, Wi-Fi, everything you need in a typical ceiling. And that is produced off-site. And then that whole module is taken into the building location, then hooked up to the concrete floor above you. Now imagine this, it's not only produced off-site, which reduces the amount of labor, increases the quality of the whole product, but on top of that, we gain roughly 1 to 2 foot height in the building. And as you all know, daylight, getting daylight into a building, not just to save a little bit on energy, that's not the main purpose, but getting a lot of daylight in the building, that's basically what it's about. The other thing we do is that if you are a developer and you try to make a new building, what you typically do is specify what you want. But that's on a relatively high level, to be very honest with you. So if you want to buy an elevator, the specification would say, oh, the building needs an elevator. It should go up and down. Yeah, that makes sense with an elevator. It shouldn't crash all the day because it doesn't make it, a very high quality elevator. And that's more or less. Sometimes they say something about speed, but that's what they do. And then it's to the engineering companies and to the general contractor to actually buy that elevator. So really, you do not know what you end up with. And this is true for anything, for light, for building management systems, for the amount of meters you have in the building. All of that is pretty much the same story. So what we started to do is define and standardize everything up front. So we now have a blueprint which goes to the architect, to the installers, to the general contractors and say, this is what you do. And by the way, this is what we buy. So obviously, as you can imagine, that is how we standardize across multiple buildings. And we already see huge savings with new projects where we don't have to go through that whole process of figuring out what technology do you want to buy, who you want to buy it from, what is the price levels. So we set a global price level, for example, with Schneider. Where we use Schneider, there's Honeywell, there's a lot of others, but we use Schneider. And of course, that makes the life so much easier for us to do the next project, because that's the other thing we think we should do, is lowering the overall cost. Even though you want to have a very smart, intelligent, sensorized, healthy building, which typically would cost you more than building a traditional building. If you do it in a smart way, we believe we can do better. On top of it, we think we can do it faster by doing it this way. And this is true for elevators and anything else. So I have one slide I really wanted to show you. It's our secret, and yet I'm going to share it with you. Obviously, in a modern building, you need an IP backbone. I don't think there's a lot of argument about that. There's a lot of technology in a building. Cool. This is how we add sensors and stuff. Initially, we did this with Philips. This is a picture of the Philips light source with the sensors built in. We now have our own sensor module. So Philips still makes the LED infrastructure for us, but the sensor does not come from Philips. And this is the kind of modularization. We want to be able to choose, because sensor technology is moving extremely fast. There's a lot of startups in this industry. Obviously, the Honeywells and the Schneiders are getting into this game. Watch this fall. You will see a lot of announcements from Schneider, Honeywell, and Delta. They all get into this space, obviously, because they have to. I first want to show you something else, because that's what I wanted to promise you. Oh, I don't have that one. Oh, yeah, it's our secret. That's why it's not there. So what we basically do, every piece of technology in the building, by definition, runs on Microsoft Azure IoT. And I'm almost religious about that. Why is this so important to us, to have one cloud platform? Because, by definition, it means that all the data, all the systems are in one cloud. Now we have access to all the data. We do not have to worry if one of those partners of us is going to move along with the next version, because they don't have choice. Microsoft decides for you when you move to the next generation. By the way, this is the same with Google and IBM, and doesn't matter. But we chose Microsoft. So what basically happens there is, if overnight Microsoft says we're going to the next version of our Azure IoT capability, then by default that means that's true for Schneider, that's true for Honeywell, that's true for ThyssenKrupp, that's true for Genetec. And I wanted to show you the picture with all those technologies. For whatever reason, I didn't put it in. So let's go back. How much time I have left? I don't know. So we got a lot of technology. We drive it in a different way. We integrate it in a different way with working with the big parties in this industry. And then we collect all the data in one platform. We are using an open platform for that. We did not build this. We did build the graphs, of course. But as you can see, it uses Microsoft Power BI. So no programming on our end. Our customers get all of those graphs from us in a fixed environment, but they can add and change it overnight. If you know how to do Excel and make a pie chart, you know how to use Power BI. And the nice thing is, in the big trend going forward, this is all going to what they call self-service business intelligence. So customers of ours will have SAP systems in the back or whatever, Salesforce. And for sure, as soon as they got the building up and running and they get the first insights from our buildings, the next thing is they want to add their HR data with it. And instead of coming back to us and say, how am I going to do it? Say, hey, just go access data, and assuming you have access to SAP or whatever the system you have in your company, you will have access to it, and you can add and change anything you want. We also have one app, which is pretty unique. Now, there's, in my opinion, 3 big areas where apps are coming from. There either are building control apps, so you can change the light, the temperature, you get access to the building, you can do audiovisual. Or you have apps that build communities, we heard about that. And then you have apps which are really on the social way that they interact with the environment. So, for example, there's an app where you can add the pizza courier, the flower guys, whatever in the area of the building, and that's how they build a community. Again, we're really looking forward to somebody who's going to do a holistic view, because we think it's all important. I want to be able to access the building with my phone, which we, by the way, that's what we do with the building. I want to do the parking, I want to do the room booking, I want to find my colleague, I want to change the light, and at the same time, at the end of the day, I want to order a pizza or whatever. The app obviously allows you to do room booking, all of that stuff. We were talking cognitive services. One of the things we've done is that you can actually be in a meeting, and in the meeting, what happens many times, oh, we have to have another meeting in 2 weeks from now. So, okay, the secretary, the PA, or whoever has to figure out another, and people spend 6 weeks a year on setting up meetings, canceling meetings, inviting people. So basically now you ask the room, can you find me a room available for, let's say in 2 weeks from now at 11 a.m. That's the first thing we do. That's called convenience. The next thing we do in the shared environment of the meeting rooms, now it gets interesting, by using algorithms, we can actually drive this a little bit. Because people are people of behavior, agree? If I have a room today, on this Tuesday for 11 a.m., I'm going to try to get a room in 2 weeks for the same meeting, next Tuesday at 11 a.m. But 11 a.m. could be the most demanded time for that meeting room. So maybe you want to suggest, by using cognitive service and smart analytics, to actually drive these people to say, hey, you know what, I got a better option for you. If the room is already forgiven and you're already booked, instead of saying no, you can try to drive this a little bit. We do the same with parking, etc. We use machine learning, artificial intelligence. Some people would say, I find that a little bit overreacting. Machine learning, I would say, is a very low-hanging fruit of what's called artificial intelligence. So, and the nice thing is, again, our customer can even do this themselves, because they can use this tool online, and once they set up the algorithm, they can pop it up in Power BI, no programmers required. It's all by drawing a picture. Then, of course, at the end of the day, the app is not only there to control stuff, but also to make it smarter. So when you leave home in the morning and the parking garage is already full, why would you go to the parking garage? It's better that the system tells you the parking is full, but I do have an alternative, etc., etc. I think I'm running out of time, Paul. So, yeah.
To listen,
so
but yeah,
let's end with that one. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.